You've come to fight as free men, and free men you are. What will you do without freedom? Will you fight? I'm sure you know this quote from Mel Gibson's Braveheart, but how well do you know the real story of William Wallace? A country split, a king imprisoned, a rebellion squashed, and a man larger than life that would pave the way for a new, bright future for Scotland. Much of William Wallace's personal life is lost to the ages, and many details that have survived come from less than reliable sources. The movie Braveheart is primarily based on a collection of poems from a minstrel named Blind Harry, written over 150 years after William Wallace died. Blind Harry romanticized many details about Wallace in order to create a more epic story. Due largely to Harry, Wallace has become more legend than man. As far as we know, William Wallace was born circa 1270, with some historians placing his birth at 1272. There's a lot of confusion about where Wallace was born, with most historians settling his birthplace as somewhere around Paisley, Renfrew. Wallace was born into a landowning family in southwest Scotland. His father was a minor noble, and a vassal to James Stewart, the 5th High Steward of Scotland. Blind Harry claims Sir Malcolm Wallace was William's father, while other sources claim Malcolm was William's older brother, and William's father was a man named Alan Wallace. Regardless of who it was, we do know that neither man signed the infamous Ragman Rolls. The Ragman Rolls is a legal document in which Scottish nobles and landowners promised allegiance to the King of England, Edward I. By not signing the rolls, the Wallace family became marked as outlaws in the eyes of the English and their supporters. It's interesting, people often misconstrue Wallace as a rugged outlaw, a common man, or even a thief. But the only crime historians can track is his family's denial of the English crown. This certainly implies that young William was brought up in an atmosphere charged with anti-English sentiment and willful pride. To be clear, the Wallace clan wasn't the only group unhappy with the state of Scotland at the time. So let's break down Scotland's political turmoil in the late 13th century. After Alexander III of Scotland passed in 1286 without a clear heir, nobles scrambled to find a suitable replacement. England's King Edward I used this as an opportunity to exert greater influence over Scotland. He essentially wanted Scotland as a vassal state, one he could draw resources and troops from for his war with France. The strongest claimants to the throne were from the Bruce clan, who, despite being sympathetic to Edward, had their own agenda for Scotland. So, Edward backed an alternative contender he could use as a true puppet. This was John Balliol. Edward's gamble with Balliol didn't really pan out as well as he thought, though. He wanted a weak ruler, and he got what he asked for. Nobody liked or really respected Balliol, and likely due to pressure from his nobles, Balliol opted to honor the Old Alliance with France. He renounced his fealty to England. Edward himself then led an army to correct this mistake. Balliol was defeated with minor resistance at the Battle of Dunbar in April 1296. He surrendered to Edward and was taken as captive to the Tower of London. This squashed rebellion in Scotland for the time being. Many nobles were not prepared to outwardly rebel, but there was plenty of unrest in the country. Something was definitely boiling beneath the surface. In 1297, sporadic rebellious outbursts began cropping up. But one act quite literally sparked Scotland's rebellion. In May of that year, William Wallace, sick of English control, gathered 30 men and raided the town of Lanark. He killed the English sheriff and burned down parts of the town. This event is often romanticized. For instance, some accounts claim that Wallace only joined the rebellion after his secret wife, Marion, was killed by the English sheriff. But there's no credible sources that really back that up, and the story was most likely added later to add drama. Regardless, the outcome was incontrovertible. Scots around the area were inspired, rising up to join Wallace as he launched raids on English garrisons between the River Tay and the River Forth. In August of 1297, Wallace laid siege to Dundee, but he abandoned it when he heard rumors that the English army was advancing on Stirling. Wallace and his men joined the force of Sir Andrew Murray of Bothwell, who had been leading a separate rebellion in the north of Scotland. Together they marched to the River Forth outside of Stirling. The English army, led by John de Warenne, Earl of Surrey, sat on the opposite side of the river. Only one bridge connected the shores. Both armies were eager to start what would become one of the most famous conflicts of the era, the Battle of Stirling Bridge. Legend says that during preliminary negotiations, Wallace declared, "Go back and tell your people that we have not come for the benefit of peace, but are ready to fight, to avenge ourselves, and to free our kingdom." Neither side was willing to back down. The exact size of the English force is often disputed, but some historians speculate they may have fielded 3 times the number of Scots. Wallace knew he was outmatched materially and in numbers, but all hope was not lost. The key to the battle was the bridge. Wallace kept his men from engaging until the English forces were halfway across. Just as a few advanced groups made it fully across the bridge, Wallace unleashed the full fury of his men. They swarmed and isolated English soldiers and quickly overtook them. As the Scots massacred their men, the English attempted to fall back across the bridge. However, they ran up against the rest of their army, which was still trying to cross. Men and horses were log-jammed, crushed together in a chaotic mess. This gave the Scots all the advantage they needed. At this point, accounts diverge on what happened next. Either the bridge collapsed under the weight of the clustered retreating English, the English broke the bridge on purpose to stall the Scots' charge, or the Scots destroyed the bridge intentionally to drown English troops. Regardless, the end result was a rout, with several English troops falling from the bridge and drowning, dragged down by their own heavy armor. Over 100 English knights were killed in the chaos, including Sir Hugh de Chessingham, Edward's treasurer in Scotland. Legend says, by the way, that Chessingham's body was hacked to pieces, and his skin was used to make sporrans and sword belts. Great souvenirs. This decisive victory was a turning point for the Scottish Rebellion. In fact, Wallace and Murray wrote a letter to traders in Lubeck and Hamburg claiming it was now safe to resume international trade. One letter still survives to this day, and contains a wax seal of the Wallace family crest. This is the only William Wallace seal known to exist, by the way. It was after the success of Stirling that William Wallace was knighted. Wallace and Murray were both named Guardians of Scotland. However, Murray passed from wounds gained at the Battle of Stirling Bridge just a few days later. As of now, Scotland was almost entirely free of English control, at least for the time being. But Wallace was not satisfied. He continued his campaign by invading northern England, raiding Northumberland and Cumberland counties. He only withdrew due to supply shortages and poor weather. Meanwhile, still without a king, Scotland set up a regency council. This council included Wallace, John Comyn, and Bishop Lamberton. Robert the Bruce declined to join the council primarily due to his rivalry with the Comyns, who had been supporters of the Balliols. Although Wallace had gained fame and power from his guardianship, many of the nobles in Scotland felt very lukewarm towards him and his methods. His influence in Scotland was solely related to his continuation of success on the battlefield. And Edward was not done with Scotland, not by a long shot. After England's humiliating defeat, Edward himself returned across the border in early 1298 with some 15,000 men. He was coming for Wallace, and nothing was going to stop him. Wallace retreated north, avoiding direct confrontation while employing a scorched earth policy to lure Edward deeper and deeper into Scotland with minimal supplies. Finally, feeling he had a good strategic position around Falkirk, Wallace prepared to make a stand. Edward and his men, who had almost given up on the long slog of a campaign, rode up to meet Wallace. And on July 22, 1298, the Battle of Falkirk began. Wallace employed his men in schiltron formations. Think of those as groups of men with long spears pointing out, sort of like a hedgehog. Edward, in response, sent in his cavalry in a two-pronged attack. This caused a panic in the Scottish cavalry, which retreated, leaving the schiltrons without any means of counterattack. It was sort of like the medieval equivalent of lacking air cover, because without a way to disperse the enemy, the Scots were sitting ducks for English longbowmen. Now, the English cavalry did suffer heavy losses from attacking the schiltrons, but this did not compare to the number of Scottish men slain by the hail of arrows that came in as the horsemen withdrew. After the onslaught, what little remained of the Scots retreated back into the forest in defeat. Most Scottish nobles did survive the day, including Wallace himself. However, Sir John de Graham and Sir John Stuart, who had both supported Wallace politically, perished in the battle. This was not a good thing for Wallace. Disgraced by the loss, Wallace himself resigned his guardianship in favor of Robert the Bruce, who put aside his rivalry with the Comyns to help lead the Scottish Council. A shaky peace began as most nobles were willing to bend the knee to Edward, at least for the time being. They were basically just biding their time, though, ready to gather their forces in secret as they waited for the aging Edward to pass away before making their move. Still a wanted man by Edward, Wallace disappeared from the public eye during this time. Many historians believe he was still actively working for Scottish freedom. The most credible theory is that Wallace escaped to France and worked as a diplomat, rallying for French financial and military support. Other more far-fetched theories include Wallace fighting as a guerrilla warrior in the Highlands, or that he escaped all the way to Rome to plead his case with the Pope. Well, regardless of what he was up to, it seems Wallace was unsuccessful. He returned to his homeland and on August 5, 1305, was captured in Glasgow by English troops. Medieval chroniclers claim Wallace was betrayed by one Sir John Menteith, which led to his capture. And that really isn't too far-fetched. After all, while many of the other nobles involved in the rebellion were pardoned, Wallace was still considered an outlaw. Wallace was dragged to London, specifically to Westminster Hall, to be charged. Legend says he was made to wear a crown of thorns to signify his lowly status as an outlaw, a gesture meant to belittle the man. On August 23, 1305, Wallace was charged with treason and sentenced to death the very same day. He rejected all the charges, stating that he never had sworn any loyalty to England, and his one true king had been John Balliol. Brave words, but nothing was going to stop the verdict, which was for a brutal execution. Wallace was dragged through the streets by horses and then slowly hanged. His neck was purposefully not snapped so he could be taken down and decapitated. He was then disemboweled and quartered. Quartering being the act where a person's arms and legs were tied to 4 separate horses, which pulled the body until it was ripped into pieces. This was a very serious punishment reserved only for the most scorned of state criminals. Its terror partly based on the medieval belief that only a whole body could be resurrected on Judgment Day. Wallace's head sat on a pike at London Bridge, while his remaining pieces were sent to Aberdeen, Berwick, Newcastle, and Stirling as a very stiff warning. This is where William Wallace's life ended, but certainly not his legacy. Robert the Bruce declared himself King of Scotland only a year later and systematically removed English control from Scotland one castle at a time. But Scotland never forgot the impact that Wallace made. Bruce may have finished the liberation, but it has always been popularly felt that Wallace started it. In the 1860s, a monument was erected at Stirling to commemorate his achievements, while at Edinburgh Castle, there is a statue of him and Robert the Bruce outside the gatehouse, honoring them both as masters of battle. Wallace might not have been the man to gain Scottish independence, but he certainly was the one to inspire his fellow countrymen to never stop fighting. Thank you for watching. You know, I can't deny that the legend of William Wallace, even Mel Gibson's version, got me into some of this stuff I'm into now. How can you beat a legend of that stature? I mean, it's made for Hollywood. It's made to become something epic and inspiring. Tell us in the comments what you think. I mean, is Braveheart a piece of crap, or is it a really good, inspiring movie despite its historical flaws? What do you think of the real William Wallace? What do you think of Robert the Bruce? Let us know how you feel. If you want more content like this, please do check out the videos over here, and we would really appreciate it if you like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications. Thank you.